This morning is a pretty quick agenda. We are going to start right off the bat with Dan Osborne with Los Alamos County Housing Specialist. And this is meant to just give you a little bit of an idea of the things that the county is already working on and maybe ways to intersect or communicate with them if you have concerns as a business with housing needs for your employees. Then we also have Amy Bell, who is representing Groundwork Studio and we are able to bring this resource through New Mexico Main Street, and she's helping work with the county and Main Street on an MRA plan for downtown Los Alamos East, and she'll give you a little bit of an overview on that project. And then we're really excited to have a guest with us, Karen Iverson, who is the director of the Metropolitan Redevelopment Agency for the city of Santa Fe, who has a lot of fantastic experience working with MRA programs and actualizing the visions from those programs. We're excited to hear what she has to say this morning. I will let you know, again, it's a very tight agenda, so we will try to only do 1 or 2 questions with each speaker and then save most of the questions for the end. So if you'll wait till then, and then at 9 a.m. we will end promptly. So if you have any remaining questions, you can reach out to Ren or myself, and we will make sure to get those to the appropriate people. Okay? So without further ado, I'd like to invite Dan to come on up.
Oh man, that's weird. Getting clapped for. Anyway, good morning. My name is Dan Osborne. I'm the Los Alamos County Housing Program Coordinator. I am sort of a boomerang to Los Alamos. I worked down here about a little over a decade ago, and I'm really happy to be back. I've been back since July. In that previous 10 years, I was the Community Development Director for the City of Salida, and then worked for Summit County, specifically working on big sort of infrastructure projects as well as affordable housing up there, and we did a number of really cool projects. And then I lived in Leadville, which has a very special place in my heart. My grandparents lived there in the 70s, and I'm a Colorado native from that area, so just absolutely love it. But we wanted warmer, and we wanted a little bit lower, and so now we're here. But one of the things that I want to, actually let me lead off with, on the way in I heard that today is International Happiness Day. So if you're not happy, let's figure out a way to get there today. And that will be great for everybody, and our mental health that we know is so important. And along with that, I want to start with a little bit of happy news around housing, because everybody talks about the dire situation that it is. And I don't want to minimize that, because I wouldn't go so far as to say that we have a crisis, but we do have a generational level challenge ahead of us to get production back where we need for housing. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit first. Since 2019, the county has brought on 488 new units. And so that's not nothing, right? We brought on Canyon Walks, the Bluffs. Those two are specifically targeted for folks working in small businesses and the support roles that are around our small businesses. It's 130 something units that are income qualified. That's very important, key component for a healthy functioning economy like Los Alamos. We've also brought on the Hills apartments. They're not quite ready, but we anticipate those will start leasing up in May. Another 149 units. Those are going to be top end. So we've hit the low end. Now we're going to hit the top end. Those will be sort of they're branded as luxury apartments. They're very nice, a large amenity package. They'll include garages for each of the units. So those are going to be sort of that higher end. So we're trying to capture both ends of that market. And then in the pipeline, we've got another 672 units that have been approved by our Planning and Zoning Commission. Our planning department has worked really hard over the last few years. I think I saw there Sobia. Sobia and her team have worked really hard to get our land use umbrella documents right-sized. That was the big community conversation that we had of, hey, what is the vision for Los Alamos? And that vision is captured in our comprehensive land use plan. It's kind of what goes where and at what density and the types of things that we want to see. My job then is to go in and get the toolbox built to help get those projects off of the ground. So a lot of the hard work has actually been done. That community vision work has been done. So we have another 672 units that have been approved by Planning Commission. We're just waiting for the market to pick up and get those units built. Planning Commission, we have another 158 units that are sort of pending, and that would include Trinity Drive, Sherwood Rounds, and some lots that we have up in North Community that we're hoping that will get going. And then we also have, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the North Mesa project. That's a joint project, collaborative project between Los Alamos County and the school district. We recently went into an MOA, a Memorandum of Understanding, to work with the school district to help bring some capacity building to that. And what I'm happy to report back is we are starting to make progress. It's all happening in the background right now. It's a little bit slow to get started, but we know that we have the potential, 29 acres of land with the potential to build, somewhere between 200 and 400 units, depending on what the community desires, and we work through that process. But what we need to figure out first is, what is the impact to our utilities? What is the impact to our transportation? Are there upgrades that we need to our water systems, to our sewer systems, and to those other infrastructure components? So we're working in-house with DPU, with our Public Works Department, and we'll be sending out a solicitation to our in-house consultants to be doing all of that background work so we can figure out what we need to make sure that that property is ready to go when a developer is ready to start looking at it. So those are kind of the fun things. So there are things happening. All said, we've got, over 1,000 units that are either coming out of the ground, on the books to come out of the ground, or pending approval. So that's exciting, and I think that that should be a real win for our community and our community development department. That said, we still have challenges, and it's sort of, the free market can charge what they want for rent, so they have sort of their own reasons to go out and do that, and that's profit, and they're going to go out and build those things as the market comes around and lending starts to open back up. But for this group, I'm also working on our affordable housing plan. We have an affordable housing plan. It's something that is required by the state. So the state, through the Affordable Housing Act, says, hey, if you want to participate in affordable housing development and use state dollars, you have to have a compliant plan. The last time our plan was updated was in 2010. So we are in the process of working with Site Southwest to update that plan, and then that plan then builds our toolbox to go out and build those developments that Sobi has done the hard work to get into our comp plan, so we know where to put them and where the community wants us to have that density. And essentially what the Affordable Housing Act does is allow us to create a local ordinance or a local code that then tells us how we can donate land and participate in projects. One of the things that we're hoping to do is broaden out who we can help. So we know that we need to capture the low end. All of the businesses in our community are needing that workforce. We're going to try to broaden that out so we have a little bit larger group of folks on that lower end that we can help and participate in. The upper end, some of those market rate stuff, yeah, there's maybe some things that we can do around the edges, but who we really want to focus on are the employees for folks that are sitting in this room. So essentially, what is the plan going to contain? There's going to be a community profile, there's a housing profile and analysis. We're going to look at what we've got, what we need, what the price ranges are, what the availability is. We're going to look at what the production numbers are. That's going to be something that's very, very important. Is we know that we're building this many, but we know our demand is this. How many more units do we need to build, and what types of units, what price ranges, and then how do we do that? Our current plan right now is like 125 pages. It's mind-bending. There's over 100 charts, tables, all kinds of stuff in there. It's good data, but it's stuff that's often out of, it's not current anymore almost immediately. As soon as you get it in there, those tables, the market changes, something happens. So we're going to try to simplify it a little bit. We're really going to try to focus more on goals, policies, and actions, things that we can actually do in our community to implement this change that I'm talking about, or this development that I'm hoping to target. And so there's kind of two different, we're starting to sort of look at this, and we're starting to understand our needs, that our needs are going to be on the low end and on the high end. And we're hoping if we can produce stuff in those two ends, that'll open our existing sort of affordable and market rate housing that already exists. The stuff that's been built, from the time that Los Alamos started to now, we think that will help free up some of that and get it back into the market. As our realtors know, that market's actually pretty healthy, right? Maybe expensive, but there's a lot of stuff turning over. People are buying and selling homes in that area. The realtors are getting their commission. The homeowners are getting a new house or upgrading, whatever they're looking to do. So that part of the market we think is actually functioning pretty well. So we're going to try to really target those two ends in this new plan. And then along with that, we're looking, what can we do locally and what can we do regionally? Because we can't build everything here. If we just took a straight model and said, hey, if we're going to capture every new job at Lanel, every new small business job that's going to open and have that economy, how many units are we going to need? And it's something nuts. It's 10,000 units, right? If we have to capture every single one of those jobs and have them here, it's going to be a very high number. And I don't think that that's what we're going to be able to accommodate for a variety of reasons, for community character, because of our utilities, because of any number of reasons. The school districts wouldn't be able to absorb that kind of growth. So what we're going to look at is, what percentage do we want to capture up here? What percentage do we want to incentivize or help develop maybe down in Espanola or somewhere else a little bit further afield, so we can get all of the unit types that we need and get them in the right locations. We do think there are people that like to commute. As crazy as that sounds, 40% of the people coming up here are commuting, and a lot of them are doing it because they have to, they want to live on a ranch. They have some other personal preference choice of why they would live somewhere other than here. So we want to make sure that the ones that do want to live here have that opportunity, but that we're also supporting initiatives in other communities regionally that would allow them to live where they want to be. So we're going to try to take sort of a two-pronged approach as we start to build out those goals, policies, and strategies on how we're going to do this. But for this group, what I am going to ask is, I am always available. I would also ask you to work through your Main Street and your local LA, through the LA CDC. If you have suggested contacts for people that we should go talk to understand what their needs for housing are related to their business. I think it's going to be a big enough number of what we're going to need to create from a production standpoint that everybody in this is going to have, we're going to capture your employment needs, or the housing needs for your employees. I think we're going to capture that because we're going to have a big enough number. But if there are specific things that you're thinking about as what your needs are or your employees' needs are, reach out to the two organizations that are hosting this, and they will get you in touch with me, or you can reach out to me directly. So that's kind of one of the takeaways for you all, is to kind of be thinking about that. The second one is, what additional housing services might be needed by your employees? Are there other things that they need to help them find housing, to stay in housing, to upgrade their housing? Those kinds of things. Because I'd also like to build some of those tools into our policy documents so we can help support those folks as well. So those are kind of the two takeaways that I would ask from you. And this group specifically, and I don't know what my time is, but if anybody has a couple of quick questions, I'd be happy to hit those too. Yes? Yep, that's you. Yep.
So, okay, I sort of have a two-pronged question. I'm a local property manager in town. Grew up here, and you mentioned that you are working with lots of entities within the county to make this work. But one of my big things that I'm involved in is youth sports as a coach. And the fields in town are a hot mess. And so with a lot of people coming into town...
I could build housing on them and we'll just get...
Actually, but no, it's a real problem. Like right now, I have kids in the soccer program. We've had, a blown ACL, we've had sprained ankles.
Yeah.
We as the soccer league have gone to the county to talk about this. But with more people coming to town, we're going to have more kids. You mentioned the schools. You mentioned the infrastructure within our town and how we're going to absorb, all these people. Well, one of the things people like to do is they like to recreate. And so
Sure.
I noticed that our parks are kind of like need help, our fields need help, and I think the Parks and Rec budget needs to be looked at. And I think that, I know we're building this sort of like big path through town, and that's going to be great for tourism, but I really think that the county should try to focus some of the stuff that is, for people that live here and the
Sure.
kids. A lot of youth go off the hill.
Yeah,
To,
I certainly hear your concern. It's a little bit outside of the scope of the affordable housing plan.
It is, but I know you're working with other entities.
Yeah, but what I can tell you is that as we build out the scope of work, like for North Mesa, we know that we need to look at the utilities, the infrastructure, the traffic, those kinds of things. We've also been talking with Corey Styron about the Parks Master Plan, because they've got their master plan that's going to be sort of moving in conjunction with this or in parallel with this, just so they know. And that's part of what I'm trying to do internally too, is get all the different groups talking so we can be anticipating the needs together. So that's going to be an important part of it. So anything that we build, we're going to want to make sure they have those. Oh, my boss is up there. Can I bring you a microphone?
No, it's okay. I just wanted to say if you wanted to touch base on what we do have funding and coming down the pipeline already for addressing the parks needs, I'm happy to talk offline.
Okay.
Perfect. Yeah, so we do have some stuff coming up, and it sounds like Ann would be happy to chat with you, and I know Corey would too.
Thank you.
We do one more question.
Okay. Please.
Hi, I'm Becca Jones from Exit Realty here in town.
Hi, Becca.
Hi. So I wondered if there was a plan in the Affordable Housing Committee to maybe work with local brokers to get data and input on what we're seeing people need in town. Because you mentioned high end and low end, but our biggest market right now is 400,000 to 600,000, which is right in the middle.
Yeah, that's kind of that existing missing middle I was talking
We
about.
have no housing for those folks. And our properties right now, over about 750 and up, are actually sitting. Like, those are the homes that we're not moving in 5 to 7 days, right?
Right.
And then, of course, people looking under 300,000. There's a house that went on the market last week, under 300, that had 40 showings. It could not be financed because of its condition, and we still had people going to look at that home because they're desperate to be able to afford something to live in. So I would caution just a little bit and maybe ask if you were getting data from the people that have access to it about where the need is and where people are actually looking in that range.
I do appreciate that, and certainly if you wanted to reach out, we would be happy to talk to you specifically. We do have access to all the MLS data. We do have access to all of the realtor data and the sales data. We have it both from the MLS and we also have it from our assessor's office. So we are looking at that to try to understand the volume and type of sales.
You don't have data though from people that are looking, and there's hundreds of people looking.
Sure, we do recognize that. And if you've got some contacts of folks that who have, I recently purchased a house here. I have to say I had a really smooth process. So that was really nice. We got very lucky. But we would absolutely, if you've got some folks that would be interested in an interview or speaking with our consultants, I'd be happy to coordinate that. Okay, thanks everybody.
We're gonna need a whole hour probably. There's just so much to say on housing. Okay, so we're gonna bring up our next speaker, Amy.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Good morning, everyone. I was just, this is really cool that you guys do this and you get such a great turnout. I'm thinking we need to start rethinking our community meetings and having them in the morning for breakfast. So, thanks all for being here. Thanks for having us. I'm super excited that we have Karen Iverson here to talk about her experience with the MRA. My name is Amy Bell. I'm a principal with a company called Groundwork Studio. We're a landscape architecture and planning firm based in Albuquerque. But today I'm wearing my New Mexico Main Street hat. We're a consultant with the state Main Street program, which is housed in the Economic Development Department. Because you all have this amazing Los Alamos Main Street program, you have Jacqueline, the community has access to free technical assistance from your Main Street consultants. So we're here doing this presentation today, working on the Downtown East MRA designation and plan, all at no cost to Los Alamos County. So you guys have really great access to resources because you have Main Street. I'm going to give just kind of an overview of what a metropolitan redevelopment area is, what we're looking at for Downtown East, as well as White Rock. Excuse me. And then I think Karen's going to get into more of the examples and specifics of how the MRA can interact with projects and with housing in particular. So a metropolitan redevelopment area is enabled by state statute. And what it does is it provides municipalities or local governments with the tools to support revitalization and redevelopment, in areas that are experiencing, difficult physical and socioeconomic conditions. So things like low business activity, vacancies, deteriorating buildings and infrastructure, unsafe conditions, housing deficits, and other related issues. What the MRA does, if it creates a boundary within which the local government is able to contribute public resources to private entities, as long as those projects support the redevelopment, the type of redevelopment that's outlined in the MRA plan. So these are projects that are going to have, tangible community benefit, and typically this would not be allowed because of the state's anti-donation clause. So the designation of the MRA and the subsequent planning process really give the local government more flexibility to support the types of projects that are needed to address these concerning conditions. And the graphic we have here just kind of talks about the ecosystem in which the MRA operates. The MRA itself, the designation and the plan and the projects, is not a silver bullet. Like everything else that we work with, this is connected to other funding sources and mechanisms, things like LEDA, Affordable Housing Act, local ordinances and policies. In every community, the MRA is can be used differently. And the statute is fairly flexible to allow for that, so that we can, as we put the plan together, we make sure that the types of projects that are supported are the right type of growth for that particular community. Just a few of the tools that are enabled by the MRA, the creation or designation of an MRA board, or agency, the MRA fund, or just a designation of a pot of money that is available to be used to support MRA projects. The MRA enables the creation of a tax increment finance district. A big one is it enables public-private partnerships. So we see, the ability for the local government to support developers, agreements between the local government and, private redevelopment projects. And then other development incentives, things as basic as like a storefront activation grant, right? So I think, for businesses, for folks representing businesses here, there's some nice opportunities for the county to support businesses, properties within the MRA, to help you with infrastructure improvements, facade improvements, site improvements, things like that. Just getting into a little more detail with these different tools. The designation of the MRA board, this doesn't have to be a separate board. Probably in Los Alamos County, this is going to be the council, right, county council. But we do need to designate a body to say, like, okay, this is a project that is eligible to receive public funds as part of, the MRA. And then also, we need to figure out where's the money coming from. In some communities, these are funds that can be generated by the TIF district. In some communities, they just use their general funds. But if we don't identify where the money is coming from, it's real hard to do implementation, right? Because, so these are kind of the real critical first steps, is like, who's gonna approve the projects and where's the money coming from, right? Public-private partnerships, or P3s, these are agreements between the municipality and private sector entities. And these can take different forms, but these are relationships where the, local government maybe puts out a request for proposal for a project, for a property. They offer to provide a particular incentive, whether that's direct funding or other resources. That project is required to meet certain, elements. When we talk about the community benefit matrix, so making sure that the project meets certain requirements that show tangible community benefit. And then those development agreements that are put together as a result, require that developer to meet those requirements, right? And if they don't, there's usually clawback provisions that are provided. So this is our guarantee that these public resources are being spent in a responsible way, right? And they're accountable. Other development incentives can include tax abatements, storefront activation grants, like I mentioned, expedited permitting, impact fee waivers, gap financing grants. Again, there's a lot of opportunities with it that are enabled by the MRA, and that's part of the planning process that will be real important, is to understand what kind of incentives are desired, what kind of barriers are folks facing for development, making improvements, redevelopment, and how can this plan and the designation of the MRA help remove those barriers. Because it's kind of a weird creature, it's kind of multidisciplinary, it lives in planning, it lives in economic development, we get a lot of confusion about certain aspects of the MRA designation and implementation. So we want to be real clear that the designation and MRA projects do not raise taxes, they do not enable eminent domain, and they do not damage property values. And this is, you know, what we've seen not just in New Mexico, but in other communities across the country who have MRAs. So more specifically, the Downtown East MRA, this is the one that we're working on now. I believe the county is working on, working with legal to draft the resolution, which will be heard in council in the coming weeks. And so this will enable that community-guided public investment in private redevelopment for this area of Los Alamos. So this is, you know, the area just right as you enter into town. This is an important gateway area where the roundabout is. And we have the, you know, the old Merrimack development here. The boundary includes some of the apartment housing to the north. The area where actually there's the old gas station, which has now been demolished. I think is there a hotel going in there? I'm not sure. I heard rumors about that. But so at any rate, so we're looking at about 55 acres, about 19 parcels. We do create the boundary based on parcel boundaries because of the relationship with the tax increment finance district. It's important that we draw the boundary based on property lines. Most of the land use in this area is commercial, and most of those commercial buildings are currently vacant. I want to be clear here too, just because it's within the boundary doesn't mean it has to be redeveloped or will be redeveloped. Okay, it just, within this boundary, it allows for additional flexibility from the county to support redevelopment projects, okay? Said some of this stuff already. Why did we choose this boundary? Again, this is the gateway. This is a high impact location for investment. It really, you know, it's where people are introduced to, like, I'm entering Los Alamos now. What does that look like? What is this place that I'm, you know, crossing into? And we, you know, as part of our work with the designation, we have done an analysis of the socioeconomic physical conditions in this area, and they do generally, you know, meet the conditions outlined in the state statute of, it's an unfortunate term, but it's what's in the statute, blight, aging infrastructure, and low occupancy. Want to be clear too, all of the properties within the boundary do not have to meet those requirements. Generally, what we want to see is that a lot of the properties within that boundary meet that requirement, okay? And again, that designation, we do not see a negative impact on property values for those properties that are doing well within that boundary, okay? General timeline where we're at, you know, we've done the assessment, number 1. We're sort of in the number 2 area with the MRA designation, providing public notice of that resolution, council hearing and adoption. After that, we will work on the plan development, which will be very, you know, heavily based on the downtown master plan. A lot of the work in figuring out what types of redevelopment projects are needed has been done as part of that master plan. But there will be additional community and business engagement to, you know, figure out the recommendations that go in this MRA plan. And then, of course, you know, we don't just want to do the plan and then put it on the shelf. We want to create the plan so that it is really primed for implementation. So as we're doing the planning process, we want to be working with the county on figuring out who that MRA board is going to be. If it is going to be county council, where is money going to come from to support these types of projects? Who are important partnerships to enable implementation as well? Excuse me. And I want to mention also, I think folks here are real familiar with the designation and plan for the White Rock MRA, and want to let folks know that we are going to be providing technical assistance to support implementation of the White Rock MRA plan as well. The MRA board that oversees the downtown east area can be the same for White Rock. The pot of funding to support MRA projects in downtown can be the same as it is for White Rock, okay? And because these are both county, I think it makes a lot of sense to think about projects in both of these areas cohesively, comprehensively, right? Okay, how did I do on time, Jacqueline?
You did good, but I think we should take questions for after Karen and then what we can respond.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, Karen, we're ready for you.
Good morning. I don't think I've ever spoken in a theater before. Thank you. Okay, I was given very specific instructions about how to use this microphone, so hopefully I have enough skills. Am I good? Okay. Okay. My name is Karen Iverson. I am from Albuquerque. I was born there. Went to college there. Went to San Diego. Did some labor union organizing around redevelopment projects, actually, and sort of created the community benefit agreement model that's been gone on to use across the country. I went to Portland State University and studied real estate. A few more jumps and hops, but I ran a housing agency in Durango, and then for 5 years I managed the redevelopment agency for the city of Albuquerque. And now I am at the city of Santa Fe starting their new redevelopment agency and focusing on the Midtown, the old College of Santa Fe redevelopment project. That's a challenge. So I get asked a lot about, and it's going to go. I get asked a lot about, about what MRA means. You know, there's just about every community across the state of New Mexico has an MRA plan, and, you know, not a lot has actually happened. And so they say, what does this mean now that we have an MRA? What does it mean to have an MRA agency, right? Santa Fe's never had an MRA agency, now they do. I'm leading it with one other staff person. And really what it means is it means focus. It means that every day, Lee and I, we go into the office and our job is to focus on redeveloping a specific place. There we go, focus. Focus. There we go, all right. So, and that's really great, right? Because in a city, you get pulled off in all kinds of directions all the time. You know, even if your bubble is housing, you might get pulled into homelessness or whatever. But we are place-based folks that every day, that is our mission and that's what we focus on. And that is super valuable in a city. And the other thing that it means is that we work across lanes. You know, sometimes I'm working, when I was in the city of Albuquerque, public safety was a big concern in downtown Albuquerque. So we would be in the public safety lane, or we're in public works lane trying to figure out how to put in infrastructure, or we're in the housing lane. So, you know, it's focus, but it's also nimbleness. And so you're creating a team, and so I think when you're looking at creating an MRA agency, how is it going to get staffed? And are you just going to give it to another person and add it to their list of things to do? Or are you going to put a position underneath it that can focus on the implementation, whether that be grant writing or activation or coming up, doing the real estate transactions? So that's, to me, the main juice of having a redevelopment agency. The other thing was that, so we had MRAs in the state of New Mexico, but again, it kind of wasn't working that well. And it was really obvious to me as an outsider why it wasn't working very well. And it's because we didn't have a funding mechanism. And so here are all the states that surround us that were able to use tax increment finance to finance redevelopment, but that New Mexico did not. And so these folks have been using this tool for like 40 years to redevelop and reinvest in their downtowns. And we only got this tool passed at the state legislature a year and a half ago. So what is tax increment? It is super important. This is the juice that makes redevelopment happen. So what you do is you take a point in time, say that base year, and you say, all right, our tax base is $100,000, for example. And so now going forward, that $100,000 is going to continue to go to the state, the county, the school districts, the water district, whatever. But now we're gonna, as the tax base grows, and it's gonna grow because we're gonna do things in this district that are gonna generate more tax revenue. As that tax base grows, we're gonna peel off that growth and only invest it in this area. So it's not just going back to the city or the county, it's just going back to that specific area where you drew the boundary. And so now you've created a reoccurring, sustainable funding source that you can count on and you can invest in your MRA district. And then after a period of time, 20 years to be exact, after 20 years, then the tax district expires and now everybody gets this higher tax base. And the argument is, but for this intervention by the public sector, this tax base would not have grown like this. So it justifies this intervention. One thing that I would say is that school districts, they will always continue to benefit from the growth. So they're an exception. School districts will always continue to benefit. And what's really important for us is that we get this for property tax and for GRT tax. We only had it for property tax until we changed the state law. And so you may know, well, I thought we had tax increment finance in the state of New Mexico. Well, we did, but it was really for greenfield development, which was really bizarre. Like we were incentivizing this, sprawling development like Mesa del Sol, Windrock, which is actually the most redevelopment orientated use of it. There's not very many examples of this. The reason was because you had to get a vote of the people within the district. The residents and the businesses had to vote and approve on creating this district. So it only worked if you owned all the land. There was no way to get it. There was no way to get the political support to do these types of districts in a redevelopment area. So now with the new state statute change, it's a city council decision. So it's a city council decision. The other great benefit about it is that the old way of doing things had to be spent on public infrastructure. In the MRA code, you can use this funding to pay for private development as well. So if you find that in your financial analysis, it's financially justified to provide gap financing for a developer who's building housing at 120 or 150% of the median income, you can do that. Like you can provide a lot more incentive to a developer through this new tool. So this is just a list of what you can spend the money on. You can spend the money on almost anything. Very flexible because of what Amy was talking about with the anti-donation. So the other cool tool that the MRA district has, and this is what we use a lot in the city of Albuquerque, is, oh wait, I had a very important point. Okay, so when we're talking about creating that boundary which is pretty much the point where you all are at right now, we're talking about how you're gonna capture the increase in tax revenue and keep it there. You wanna make sure that your boundary includes tax generating uses. So when you're looking at your boundary, if you've got like a major grocery store that's right next to your boundary, it might make sense to put that in the boundary. Just because, there's a lot of lenses that you're using to create these boundaries. Where do you want to invest the money? Where do you have potential projects? What qualifies as blight? And also, what's going to be a good tax increment district? And like Amy said, not every property has to be, quote, blighted. And it's a little blip. It's a little momentary blip on the political policy making thing of, making this designation, and then it's over. And then the district has all of these financial benefits that actually, if anything, increase the property value. So the other thing that you can spend money on, or not spending money on, the other financial incentive you can have is a tax abatement, and this is in the MRA code. Now, you can't abate taxes and collect the tax increment to provide subsidy. You kind of have to choose one or the other. So this is what we did at the city of Albuquerque prior to having this new legislation that will enable tax increment finance. And you can abate all of the property taxes for 7 years. It comes out to, at that time, it came out to about $10,000 a unit is what the net present value of that type of subsidy is. And we came up with a really clear rubric of how to qualify for it and pretty much made it an administrative process. There's about 20 MRA districts in the city of Albuquerque, basically follow all along Central Avenue and then down 4th Street, so our two old Route 66 corridors. It's just me? I'll just wave my hand some more. And what's really cool about that tax increment finance tool, one of the things that's great about it is that it doesn't require, once you set up the bank, once you set up the tool, it does not require the public sector to go out and then acquire land and do this heavy lift on the public side. What you can then do is projects that come in and apply and they say, I'm meeting your policy goals, I want to qualify for tax increment, they can get a rebate, right? So every year they say, I would have, I paid these taxes and now I'm getting a rebate, okay? So it's a way to leverage the private sector, right? So you're providing an incentive. Both of these are ways of leveraging what's already happening in the market and providing an incentive rather than, going out and having to acquire land, go out to RFP, da-da-da-da-da. Santa Fe, Midtown area, this is like Cerrillos, this is St. Michael's between Cerrillos and St. Francis. They did a massive overlay district, a whole bunch of zoning incentives, regulatory incentives, no impact fees. They don't have to go get water rights, which I just found out, which is an awesome thing this week. It's an all of the approvals are administrative, which is a really big leg up in Santa Fe. All of these levers on like density are pulled all the way to the max is a great example of a zoning incentive. But I will say that nothing has really happened in the Midtown Link District. So, zoning is not everything. This is a really great example, but nothing really happened because, it just wasn't, you also need financial incentives. You also need to have the right public infrastructure to create a nice streetscape to support this more urban environment. And also because this is a very strip malled area, and a lot of times those strip malls have leases with tenants that require a certain amount of parking, so there's some other regulatory things, but still a really great example of a regulatory package. So you need a source of funding, right? That really is the nut of Metropolitan redevelopment. There's a couple of ways to get it. We talked about tax increment finance. You can waive the impact fees. At the City of Albuquerque, we waive all the impact fees as well. At the City of Albuquerque, we had a general obligation bond questions that went out every 2 years. And there was one for libraries and streets and parks, but there was one for redevelopment, Metropolitan redevelopment. So that was a source of getting funding. We also, on occasion, had the general fund through the budgetary annual process, just line item us a couple $1 million into the fund as well. The other option is, I don't know, probably most of you are aware, but Santa Fe just passed an excise tax, which is a 3% tax on homes over $1 million for every dollar over $1 million. And 73% of the voters approved it, and it's projected to garner about $6 million a year for affordable housing. So switching gears just a little bit, and lifting up a little bit from talking about housing, somebody mentioned some kind of really exciting trail that you guys are doing? An urban trail. I have an urban urban trail story too. It's amazing. So at the city of Albuquerque, one of my projects that I got to work on for several years is the rail trail loop through the city of Albuquerque. And going from left to right, you know, I got to start with the engineering, very technical analysis. Can we fit white outlined people in this space? You know, to the landscape architect's vision of, you know, there's going to be plants here and it's going to be a nice space. And then the most recent iteration by the late Antoine Predock of, you know, how we're going to celebrate and make this a monument to New Mexico. And so obviously you guys are on the bandwagon of using infrastructure as a catalyst, right? Like this is going to eventually be a 7-mile loop through downtown that hits all of downtown's amenities, the convention center, the zoo, the rail yards, sawmill, all those destinations. And what was really exciting about this project was in a matter of like a month, I had a $15 million project. And in over a month, during a month span, we got $40 million for it, which was super exciting. And the reason why we got so much money so quickly is because it was a super compelling story. Everybody loved this idea. It had been like this myth kind of project, like, oh, if we could just put a rail trail through the rail corridor. It had been worked on for like decades. But what's really essential to actually push it over, to get it going, was just thinking really small. So the project was originally just 1 mile. You know, it's just going to go from the rail yards to downtown. That's all it was. And so thinking incrementally is super important. And the other thing that was super important was the investment of the private sector. So we started a group called Friends of the Rail Trail. And in New Mexico, we do not have very many business improvement districts. I think Gallup is the only one that does. Most cities across the nation have a business improvement district where you have the private sector sort of coming together and assessing themselves a small increment that helps them provide security, activation, and other things. And I think one of the struggles we have in New Mexico is that our economy is so public sector driven that we don't tend to see that type of partnership, especially in our downtowns, because our economy does not depend on our downtowns being vibrant. Our economy depends on labs and other things. Another thing that was really important about this was taking risks. You know, I had the ability to work in an environment where, you know, I was allowed to fail, and I was allowed to fail, you know, spectacularly. Like, you know, here is an amazing project that did not take off, that was going to be a Meow Wolf based on the railroad era type of exhibit. But that was okay, and this was just one of the examples. So for every rail trail project, I had like 3 failures. So I think it's really important. In the public sector, you're under such scrutiny all the time by people. It's really important to be able to fail and to support your public sector in being experimental and trying different things, and supporting them when things don't move forward. Activation, it sounds like the Main Street, Jacqueline, you're doing a great job at activating space. I think activation is such an important and understated strategy when it comes to redevelopment. We focus on the infrastructure, but it's really about incubating our local businesses and activating. So this is the rail yards in Albuquerque, and with a small amount of money, it's a behemoth project with huge buildings. We were able to just clean up that courtyard and sort of get the Borealis Community Coalition and the Farmers Market in there, and that's really important for creating a destination, even temporarily, and building a market, building, you know, a known place. Of course, in all of this, we have to worry about what's happening with our local residents, and with or without redevelopment projects, they're facing intense pressures, right? And I think that there's some very easy things that we can do, low-hanging fruit. One of them is just educating people and having some resources to a local community group to educate people how much their house is worth. You know, so they're not victim to predatory people who, you know, I was trying to get into thinking about flipping houses in Like number 1 says, you don't flip houses by buying houses that are on the market, you flip them by buying houses that people have no idea what the value is worth. So, you know, having some resource out there to provide renters' rights, a hotline, and to proactively kind of outreach to people and tell them, hey, if you want a voluntary opinion of your house, we're happy to provide that service. Could really protect people from being predatory on. And lastly, I'll just kind of conclude with, you know, redevelopment and this work that we all do. It is so hard. We have so many competing interests and point of views coming to the table that we're trying to reconcile. You know, all these policies are really well intended, but they oftentimes, you know, are contradictory, and we can't reconcile them all. So I just, especially in today's, you know, political environment, it is so important that we come to the table and in a spirit of just mutual understanding and really working hard to take each other's perspective and understand each other's point of view. So that, thank you.
Bringing it to, so we have a little bit of time left for questions, and I highly suggest you ask as many as you can in the next like 5-6 minutes. And then the rest you can send to me or Ren, and we will make sure to get some responses for you. So, okay. Go ahead and start.
A quick question. You probably said this in your slides, but once a community defines an MRA, how is it approved? Is it approved by the state based on certain criteria, or just let them?
You go ahead. So the city council would approve your plan, but if you want to create a tax increment district, well, here you are the county, so the state would approve the dedication of its own tax increment to the district. So, does that answer your question? Okay. The other thing too that I want to say, and I can say these things because I don't live here, but you know, I do think that one of the other boats that we aren't understanding right in the state of New Mexico is the idea that a Metropolitan Redevelopment Agency really should be separate from the city. And you can strike a gavel and you can hit it and you can say the city council is now meeting as a Metropolitan Redevelopment Agency. And the reason is because so can kind of still be in the same bucket, but there's sort of a separation. The reason is because there are some really important things like procurement. Like you can do procurement differently under a Metropolitan Redevelopment Agency, which is a really important tool in the toolkit.
David.
So I want to understand better the difference between an MRA and standard LEDA. Well, you know, project by project redevelopment. And one of the things, there are a lot of problems in Los Alamos, but one of the problems that we don't have, I think, is tax revenue, because a big source of tax revenue is the laboratory. So if you don't use tax increment funds, and you have general fund dollars to do what you might want to do, what's the advantage of an MRA versus individual project by project LEDA?
So LEDA, you have to be creating base economic jobs. And then you enter into a participation agreement whereby that entity has to prove that they met those economic job creation or economic spend benchmarks. With MRA, you don't have that, so you can just fund real estate development and housing. You can't do housing with LEDA because its core is, are you generating base economic jobs? Base meaning not service industry or hospitality, but base. I don't know, is base good enough? Okay, all right.
We have one up here too.
Hi, I'm Brandy. I kind of had like a question for the three of you that spoke. So it sounds like you guys have like a super great plan to build infrastructure and housing, but being, you know, I'm from Albuquerque, I'm a minority that grew up in New Mexico, I really feel like one thing you guys need to focus on is creating that open gate environment of Los Alamos. Because growing up, you know, I've always kind of been told, oh, you can't live there, it's too expensive. And I've been told, you know, multiple times, oh, they don't like black people up there. So for me, hearing all of this stuff, I think it's a beautiful plan structure, but I kind of just want to encourage us to think about how do we get people to want to live here? How do we break that culture for local minorities to want to come live in Los Alamos? And you mentioned Española. You know, I work at Intel down in Albuquerque, Rio Rancho, and nobody ever wants to go to Española. When I tell them I'm coming up north, they say, avoid Española, don't get gas there. So it's like, I think we have to start about first making people comfortable to want to live in these lower affordable housing. You know, we want those people to want to come up here and work for the business owners, but there's just such a culture of everything is off the hill. You know, she spoke about youth sports. Why do the kids have to go off the hill, but then we're trying to get so many people on the hill? Like, I feel like Los Alamos has this big, I don't know, like big umbrella that we're a happy lab, our community's great, but then really, you know, being here, immersing myself, and you know, it sounds like the kids can't even play sports without getting hurt, but then we have these $400,000 houses, and I totally understand that, but I guess my question is, or how can we work together to make the gates open, you know, like this summer, like get those local tourists up here to actually see the trails, to actually see the museums, to see that there are places to work and that it's an open community. And I love your guys' plan, but I think to get there quicker and to get there better, we have to start marketing Los Alamos as open to all New Mexicans, not just that secret place in New Mexico, you know?
Thank you for your comment,
Yeah, thank you. I think those are all super important, and I 100% agree. We need to build a diverse community, and that's not only in Los Alamos. I think that's sort of everywhere where it's accepting of all lifestyles and points of view. That said, a couple of quick things. With the affordable housing that we're working on, with the low-income housing tax credits, you would drive by and you would live in there and you wouldn't know it was a low-income or income-qualified project. And there are no geographic barriers on that. If you wanted to do the commute, the reverse commute, and you qualified to live there, you could come live here and work your job off the hill. So we are trying to open that up, and through those programs, it does broaden sort of who we're able to capture. We're hoping that a lot of those people want to work here as well, but it's not a prerequisite. The second thing is, let me give you my card. I would love to get your perspective, and I'd love to get you in touch with our consultant to capture that perspective as we move forward with our affordable housing
That's
plan.
really great. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Did you guys want to give a response?
Yeah, just real quick, and Karen may want to jump in on this too, but I think I want to go back to the community benefit matrix component of the MRA plan, and also, you know, remind everyone that plan has not been completed yet. We have to have the designation first, and then the planning process. And community involvement to develop what that community benefit matrix is really important. Like, say, for example, if the county in that benefit matrix wanted to you know, specifically support projects, businesses owned, you know, by people of color, that's an option. And so I think that, you know, it's real important that, you know, the folks in this room, you know, and that we get that really good community engagement in Los Alamos to understand what types of projects should the county really be supporting so that it is, you know, an inclusive and welcoming community.
So, I'm curious, what is the ideal size for a successful MRA in a community this small?
Utilize efficiently.
Yeah, I think that, so the plan that Amy outlined, there's one new step on it, which is you have to create to get the tax increment finance, is you have to do a tax increment finance plan. So that plan would then sort of estimate what the tax increment's gonna be and look at the cost of the projects that you have and sort of marry all of that up. I mean, I'll let you know that the legislation is that you can go up to 75% of the incremental GRT and property tax, which when we put this through to the state, the analysis is that we brought forward, we had 3 model cities, Las Cruces, Ruidoso, and Albuquerque. We dialed those back to only 30%, because if we took the full 75%, it was like a ridiculous, it was an embarrassing amount of money, you know? So I think that's how you right size it, is that analysis of what it is that you wanna
Yeah.
produce.
And I would say that, and I just couldn't see because I don't have my glasses on, that the increment district is very small. It is not 55 acres. It's closer to less than 10. Well, what I saw up there, maybe I missed the point, but I'm just curious because this is a very centralized economy up here that runs about a mile on either side of the street. So I was just curious if there was data or something that could be used.
I can't answer your data query, but I can say that the process for a site-specific MRA began about a little over 2 years ago, actually. And a lot of it had to do with recognition of, again, this is where people were coming in, how can we help this area? So talking with Main Street, they said, you know, you've worked on a plan in White Rock, I think you're seeing that you want to further that plan and come up with mechanisms to actualize things in that plan. We can help you with a site-specific one. If it were to be much bigger, it would need to go out for consultant to bid on. So it's a little different process. So in this case, we're able to keep it all in-house because we have resources through New Mexico Main Street. So that's part of it. And there is in 2 years ago, and I think maybe Sylvia might want to jump in on this too, but like over that time frame, we recognized that area in particular needed support. The same as like whereas all of the White Rock Commercial District needs support. So
Just curious.
Yeah, no, and thanks for catching that. I think you're right. It is not 55 acres. It was a typo. Thank you. We'll correct that. How many times have we given this presentation?
It may have included the White Rock.
No, even that.
We'll figure it out. But thank you for bringing that to my attention. You know, it's a really interesting question, right? Because when we look at the size of MR areas across the state in different sized communities, you know, Albuquerque has over 20 different areas. You know, one, you have to make sure that, again, you know, a certain amount of properties and, you know, physical socioeconomic conditions within that area meet the state statute requirements for eligibility for designation. I don't, you know, and that's something we looked at too, in terms of, you know, vacancies, infrastructure conditions, you know, and all of those other, you know, conditions that we talked about. Not a lot of Los Alamos necessarily is eligible for those reasons. I think, you know, thinking about character too and the types of projects that are supported, Farmington, for example, has they have at least 3 different MR areas that are based on sort of different character areas. They have like their sort of the more like the Animus, the river, the more industrial area. They have their civic center, and then is that one the same as their downtown? But that's important too, because again, you know, figuring out like what types of projects are going to be supported by that MR fund money might be different in different parts of town if you have a larger municipality.
Okay, thank you so much.
might be able to sneak one more. I know Sandy's had her hand up.
I had a question for Dan. I know that we're building some affordable apartments. Are we also building affordable homes? And what do you classify as affordable? What is that definition?
So typically, so there's a lot wrapped up in that. So the definition of affordability, we do have that in our code, and so that's a codified number, and it's typically 60% or less, 80% less. So those are codified things that we have in our affordable housing plan. It's also what we're going to be looking at as part of our affordable housing plan, is that capturing enough? So, you know, that'll be something that'll be a specific number. The affordable units that have been built so far are all rentals. Getting into the affordable for sale units gets a little bit more complicated because we don't have a mechanism to keep them affordable through time. We do have the home buyer assistance program, which helps with the down payment assistance and helps make it more accessible on that first purchase. But once that first purchase happens, there's nothing that's holding it, keeping that income qualification through time. And so that's something that we'll also be looking at with our affordable housing plan as perhaps a recommendation for something to implement down the road. And so we'll be having those conversations as part of that.
So there are no homes currently planned that would be in the 200,000 or 100,000?
I am not aware of any market rate builders who are providing that level of affordability. I have not seen communities that without some sort of permanent affordability mechanism, like a deed restriction or some sort of other covenant, that have been able to deliver those in markets like ours.
Is that something we could do?
I think that that is a great question that we need to have as a community.
Not the current cost of construction building.
Yeah.
I mean, it's 500, yeah, exactly, square foot to build something. It's a trickle down.
Yeah, there are definitely funding mechanisms and models to get to those, but there are pros and cons, and there are requirements for additional participation because the market just can't deliver those units.
I think are we out of time?
Yeah, we're out of time, but I have a suspicion if you race up here, we might grab one or two of these folks before they leave. Thank you, everybody, for coming this morning. We look forward to seeing you the next Chamber breakfast.